We are back at BigLeaguePolitics.com, joined today by the investigative journalist and our very own contributor, Laura Loomer. Laura, in the center of national controversy as always, thanks for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Patrick.
Now, yesterday, the co-founder of the Women's March, or actually the outright founder, Teresa Shook, demanded that Linda Sarsour step down. Talk to us about Linda Sarsour. Who is she?
Well, Linda Sarsour is a Muslim activist who's really positioned herself to be kind of a ambassador, if you would call it that, for the Democrat Party. And she's also one of the prominent faces of the Women's March. And as a leader of the Women's March, Linda Sarsour has used her platform to speak on behalf of the Women's March and the issues at hand, and to organize rallies for the Women's March. But the only issue is that the same values that the Women's March is claiming to represent and protect, things like pro-LGBTQ rights, inclusivity for all, including Jews and Christians, are things that Linda Sarsour directly opposes through her own ideology and her own associations with individuals who she has deemed to be her mentor. Linda Sarsour, it's not a secret, is very openly anti-Jewish. She tries to hide behind the progressive mask as an excuse for all of her anti-Semitic comments, but just weeks ago she said something like, Jews should not be humanized, right? Several days ago she was put on blast by people on the left and the right because she was trying to say that Jews have dual loyalties, which is a very old anti-Semitic trope. Linda Sarsour also has expressed support for Hamas, the terrorist organization. She is very outspoken against Israel and believes that that Palestinian terrorists are doing a service when they attack and try to kill Israelis. These are Linda Sarsour's own sentiments expressed on her own social media. Yet the Women's March and many Democrats who recently ran for office across America have decided to campaign with her and align themselves with her. But at Politicon in October, I actually took it upon myself to confront Alyssa Milano during the Me Too panel, and I asked her to disavow Linda Sarsour. And it's the first time that one of the Women's March organizers has been publicly asked to disavow Linda Sarsour as another representative for the Women's March based on her support of Sharia. And what do we know about Sharia? Well, Sharia is anti-woman, it's anti-gay, it's anti-Jewish, it's anti-Christian, it's everything that is pretty much not Muslim. And so when I brought up my concern about Linda's open support of Sharia law and her being a representative for the Women's March, I had no other choice than to demand that these women disavow. And since my video, Alyssa Milano has disavowed Linda Sarsour, as well as Deborah Messing. She has disavowed Linda Sarsour. And now, as you first mentioned at the beginning of the show, the founder of the Women's March has asked not only Linda, but Linda Sarsour and Tamika Mallory, another anti-Semite, to step down.
So when we hear about honor killings of little girls, or we see the videos of women being stoned, or the the hoods that they have to wear over their heads, and in some cases their whole bodies, you're telling me that those governments in the Middle East are not good women's rights activists?
No. Yeah, and under Sharia, under Islamic law, women have less rights than animals. I mean, for example, right, this is one thing that really bothers me, is how you have Linda Sarsour, who claims to be an advocate for Sharia, in her own words, on her social media, as a representative for the Women's March. Well, the Women's March, they organized a lot of rallies around these women who falsely accused Brett Kavanaugh of rape. Linda Sarsour herself was seen in the halls of Congress getting arrested and escorted out for falsely accusing Brett Kavanaugh of rape with these women, the hashtag Believe All Women campaign. Well, in the Middle East, right, in places where Sharia law is the law of the land, if you're a woman and you're raped, you have to have 4 male witnesses in order for anyone to believe you, or you're just going to be stoned to death. You could be killed if you are raped in the Middle East as a woman, if 4 men were not witness to you being raped. So, this is what Linda Sarsour supports. She supports this ideology, and it's, pretty hypocritical for an organization that claims to support women and women's rights to, put the patriarchy of Islam in the front and center of their march, in the front and center of their movement, by appointing Linda Sarsour as one of their representatives.
Laura, what are you seeing out there in terms of the jihadi threat inside the United States?
Well, it's quite extensive, of course. In all around this country, you have different pockets of Islamic migrants who have settled. Under Obama's administration, he worked tirelessly to make sure that droves of Islamic immigrants were imported into different communities across America. And one of the communities that's really facing the consequences now is Minnesota. Minnesota, where Keith Ellison was just elected as Attorney General, despite the fact that he has a record of abusing women, where Ilhan Omar, who is one of these jihadis recently elected to Congress, will now be serving to replace Keith Ellison's seat in the 5th Congressional District. These are people who are openly anti-Jewish. They are pro-Sharia, pro-FGM. They want more Islamic immigration. They refuse to condemn Hamas. It's very troubling because not only do we have these people coming into our country, but now they're going to be serving in the halls of Congress.
And actually, the Minneapolis Police Union came out and told people not to vote for Keith Ellison in kind of an unprecedented move. What do you see for him up there? And now that he's the Attorney General, he's the top law enforcement officer in the state. Is it just going to be anarchy and chaos?
Yes, because you have an officer now. You have Keith Ellison, who is the top cop serving as Attorney General, who has endorsed Antifa. He, as we all know, he took a picture with the Antifa playbook and said that he wanted to cast fear in the hearts of Trump and Trump supporters. This guy supports people who have called for cops to be killed. He believes in Sharia law, not the United States Constitution. And so, we're going to have a mix of a top law enforcement officer who supports total anarchy, but also Islamic law. It's very concerning.
Mm-hmm. I was always wondering when ISIS was going to start working with Antifa here in the United States. It looks like in the Las Vegas case that might have already happened.
Yeah, I believe so. And, look, Antifa already is working with ISIS. There was an FBI report that was released and documented in one of Ed Klein's books, of course, that shows that the FBI has been monitoring some of these left-leaning organizations like Antifa, whose members have been traveling overseas to Iraq and Syria, where they're participating in weapons training with ISIS. And that's why you see such a strong allegiance with these Marxist organizations and the Islamic organizations. It's the Marxist Jihadi Alliance, otherwise known as the Red-Green Alliance.
Now, what is the goal of the Red-Green Alliance? I mean, are the communists and the Islamic radicals going to be able to coexist if they take power?
Well, that's not what they're thinking about immediately. Their immediate goal is to undermine and destroy the United States Constitution, right? To erode the Constitution of our constitutional republic. And then, of course, you brought up a good point. Their ideologies are not going to be able to exist among each other, but right now it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And so they're using each other as useful tools in accomplishing a direct goal or a common goal of destabilizing the United States and eroding the Constitution. But you can believe it that once the jihadis gain power, then all of these progressives who are taking their side, like these left-leaning Jews or the homosexuals or these liberals who are telling people to stand by jihadis regardless simply because they're Muslim, well, they're going to be the first to go when the Muslims finally do accomplish the goals outlined in the explanatory memorandum, their goals to take over politically and socially and economically here in the United States of America.
So really the left in this country and the media are useful idiots.
Yes, they definitely are.
Not very useful to the people, though, but useful to somebody. Useful to Hillary Clinton, I guess. Is Hillary Clinton going to run again in 2020, Laura?
I think so. I think that's why she's doing her little tour right now, where she's traveling around with Bill Clinton, selling tickets for crazy prices. And I think she's trying to rebrand herself as a progressive, radical grandma. We already saw it in the past couple months in which she was doubling down, calling for people to not be civil, calling for basically violence, right, against Trump supporters. And I think that she will try because this woman only cares about one thing and one thing only, and that's power, right? And it doesn't matter how sick she is or, how physically incapable she is, this woman is going to do everything in her power to become the first female president.
Now, Laura, you recently found the box of ballots in the Fort Lauderdale airport. Now, luckily, the Republicans have won in Georgia and Florida in the overtime period. What does this say about our election process going into 2020, that there were boxes of ballots going through the airport being delivered by Avis Rent-A-Cars? Andrew Gillum and Stacey Abrams, I think, stress-tested our democracy more than I've ever seen before. Can you tell us what's going to happen next?
Well, we're just going to see more voter fraud because this was just the midterm election, right? But going into 2020 with Donald Trump, possibly up for his second term, you can expect the Democrats to be using more of these tactics to undermine our democracy and to undermine voter integrity. It's absolutely egregious that the sheriff here in Broward County, Florida, Sheriff Scott Israel, called in a bomb threat to cover up the fact that a box of provisional ballots were found in the back of an Avis rental car. They knew that it was provisional ballots. They received a call telling them that the box in the back of this Avis rental car was marked provisional ballot. It wasn't a bomb, yet they shut down the entire airport for about an hour or so, hour and a half, scaring people, sending people into a frenzy to cover up the fact that a box of provisional ballots was found. And it gets even better because the driver of this car, Noah Holloman, he's friends with Sheriff Scott Israel on Facebook, and on his Facebook he has pictures of himself with Andrew Gillum.
Laura, what is the next thing for you? What's your next story? What's your next big investigative report?
Well, I'm making a Loomer list. There's a lot of people now that deserve to be Loomered and a lot of new people in Congress who I will be paying a visit to. And so I'm just perfecting my Loomer list because come 2019, a lot of people are going to be getting Loomered.
You do not want to be on the Loomer lists, but I think we're on the good list. Right, Laura?
Yes, you are on my good list.
All right, good. BigLeaguePolitics.com. We'll be back later. Laura, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.